All right, so health promotion of adolescent and family. This is their transition between childhood and adulthood. And it basically starts when they have puberty, and it ends when their body starts growing at about 18 to 20 years of age. So when a child is prepubescent, that is about 2 years before puberty. Puberty is when sexual maturity is achieved. Postpubescent is 1 to 2 years after puberty, and this is important because this is when skeletal growth stops. So for most girls, they have stopped growing at about 14 to 16 years of age. They're done. Boys take a little bit longer. They're about 16 to 18 years of age. All right. And then adolescent, it's basically lots of psychological growth, physical maturation, and social. Big time social. So we're going to talk a lot about their biological development because that's the biggest thing that's happening with them in adolescence. They are going to be developing their primary sex characteristics, which are basically the organs needed to reproduce. And that, as a parent, as a healthcare provider, that is how you should approach children when talking about sex. You don't talk about it about the feelings or this or that, is that sex is basically for reproduction. Secondary sex characteristics are all the things that go along with it. Your voice changes, the hair growth. You don't need those things to reproduce, to make a baby, but because of all the hormones happening in the body, they kind of come along with it. So basically, the hypothalamus stimulates that anterior pituitary to stimulate hormones. That stimulates the gonads. And basically for females, it's luteinizing hormone that gets stimulated, and that's what produces estrogen for females. And for males, it's the follicle stimulating hormone that gets released. And that is a big factor of what produces testosterone and helps make their sperm. And we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail. So sex hormones are secreted by the ovaries, testes, adrenal glands. And they're produced in both males and females. So males and females have testosterone. Males and females have estrogen. They just have various amounts. Okay. That adrenal cortex, the androgens is what stimulates the testes, and the testes release testosterone, and that's why males have large amounts of testosterone compared to females. Testosterone is also responsible for your secondary sex characteristics. And again, because it's present in both males and females, that's why both males and females have those secondary sex characteristics. Men just tend to be more prominent because they have a larger amount. Estrogen is what's responsible for menstruation, ovulation, because it's released by the ovaries. So estrogen is the feminizing hormone. Again, it's produced in both, but females, so menarche is when they get their period, their first menses. And what happens is estrogen will rapidly rise for that first 3 years after menarche, and then it will stabilize and be that way throughout their whole time that they're able to reproduce. That's why they're kind of crazy when they first get their periods, because they're just, hormones are totally out of whack for a bit. And again, the androgens are those masculinizing hormones. But androgens, that's what promotes that tremendous growth that's happening in adolescence. It rapidly increases in both sexes until about 15 years of age. And it's why they have such growth in adolescence. And like I said before, it's also the reason they have all those secondary sex characteristics. So pubic hair, acne, body odor, all the things we absolutely love as a teenager. Thank you, androgens. We use Tanner staging to kind of estimate what their sexual maturity is. It's based off their secondary sex characteristics. All right. So remember, secondary sex characteristics are the things we don't need to reproduce. So breasts, pubic hair, size of our testicles, size of our penis, those type of things are what we use to Tanner stage. And it's just an estimate. It's not a specific science. So for females, thelarchy is when they get breast buds. Then about 2 years after they get breast buds, that's when they get menarche. Menarche is their first period. They start to get pubic hair about 6 months after breast bud development. And it's totally weird for them. So you have to talk with them. And they can be very, very tender as well. So when they get those breast buds, it hurts. There's a bump on their chest that wasn't there before. And they're like, what the freak is going on with my body? Okay? So you have to tell parents, and it's 8 years old, as early as 8 years old, this can be starting. Typically, it's around 10-ish that you see it. But you have to talk with the, parents of the child. Tell them it's okay to have these conversations. Because if the kid doesn't feel comfortable enough to be like, what the freak's going on with my body, they're going to feel ashamed about it. So tell them, listen, you might feel uncomfortable. A lot of times girls, even wearing a shirt, the rubbing of the shirt hurts them. So that's why they wear bras. Because a lot of parents will be like, they don't have anything. Why do they need a bra? The bra is not there to support. The bra is there because they're aware of their body. They can see the bumps through their shirt, and that makes them self-conscious. And it's tender. And so by putting a sports bra on it or some kind of padding over it, it kind of protects it and makes it not as uncomfortable for them. And again, tell them that they're going to start seeing hair down there, and that's okay, and not to freak out. And then tell them that, what is menarche, that you might see blood when you wipe or in your underwear, and tell them what to expect. All right. Puberty delay is basically they have not had breast buds by 13 years of age. So they may not have their period by 13, but that's okay. As long as they've gotten breast buds by 13, then they have started puberty. If they have not gotten breast buds by 13, then they are delayed puberty. If they get them before the age of 8, it's too early, precocious puberty. Even after they get their period, they are not going to start ovulating and having regular periods until at least 6 to 12 months afterwards. So they might get their first period and may not have another one again for 6 months. And tell them that's okay and that's normal. And pretty much once they get their period, their growth stops about 2 years later. So if they get their period at about, 12, then about 14, they're going to be at their adult height. So females, we stage them by breast development and by pubic hair. And this is pages 451, 452 in your WAN 10th edition. You guys can go over that yourself. For males, We stage them by their testicular enlargement and pubic hair, also by penile enlargement. Voice changes. My son cracks me up because every day if he talks and his voice makes one little sound, he's like, "Was that it? Did I hit puberty, Mom?" And I'm like, "I don't think so, buddy. I think your voice just went." Boys can develop gynecomastia. It's very common. It happens in about 70% of boys. Gynecomastia is breast enlargement. And so boys will come in and be like, "What the heck? Like, I knew my sister was going to get breast. Why do I have them?" Again, because, yeah.
Does it eventually go away, though?
It does, yeah. For most, it does. But it's within about 2 years, it disappears. But for some, it stays, and a lot of times we have to do hormone therapy or something to help them along. Again, remember, they have estrogen and testosterone in there, and sometimes that varies. So they will get some breast development. Again, tell them it's normal, not to freak out. But if their friends aren't developing like that, it can make them feel very self-conscious. For boys, they have puberty delay if there's no testicular enlargement or scrotal changes, because that's what you see first, by the age of 14. And again, boys tend to be older when they stop their growth, like 18 to 20 years of age. There's the Tanner stages for males, same page numbers in long. So they have huge growth spurts. About 25% of their total height is achieved during this time period. But it's kind of, and they get about 50% of their ideal body weight. And this all occurs in like a 2-year period. Sometimes a little longer, but typically this 2-year period. And of course, it's adolescence when you're most awkward and feeling funny about yourself already because you have all these body parts growing and all these bumps and hair and acne and your voice is changing. So you already feel horrible and awkward enough. And then when you grow, you tend to grow, like your extremities grow first. So you get like big hands and big feet before you actually like start growing, taller. So you know how teenagers tend to have that gawky appearance? That's what you have to think about. They get like big hands, big feet before like the rest of their middle part of the body kind of catches up. That's why they look a little gawky and feel it. Skeletal growth, just know that girls tend to go first. We've already talked about it. And then remember when we talked about mobility? I hope you do because you will be tested on it on your final. That epithelial plate, right? The growth plate. Once that closes, that's when growth stops. So girls tend to have closure of that plate first. So they grow first, have their growth plate close, and then they stop. While boys tend to be a little slower to start growing, but once they do, they surpass females, and then it takes them a little longer. We've already talked, girls' voices get deeper as well, not just boys, but ours is more gradual because we don't have as high testosterone in us. So we do get a little bit deeper of a voice than we have, but males really see that change. And they go from really high tones to low tones in mid-sentence as they go. Lean body mass. Males have more lean body mass, of course, than females. And they think that's mostly due because of the blood circulating in their body. They just have more red blood cells. Non-lean body mass is like your fat. And typically, they tend to kind of plump up a little bit right before they're going to have a big skeletal growth. It's like their body's like, okay, I know I'm going to be like kind of like Gumby and elongate. So they kind of plump up and then elongate. So physiological changes, they become more like adults. Their blood pressure increases. Their heart rate decreases. They have more lung volume, so their respiratory rate can go down. Their blood volume is greater, especially in males. Again, that increased blood volume is what makes them have leaner body mass. Pretty much they're like an adult now. So there's lots of biological stuff going on with them. More so than probably we've had since infancy, right? Infancy, there was a lot of biological growth, then we kind of slowed down. Now, all of a sudden with adolescence, we had this big biological growth. But we can't forget about all of our favorite theorists. So the first one is Erikson, and that's that sense of identity versus role diffusion. So they're really dependent on their peer groups. And they have to kind of figure out their role within the peer and their relationships with their peers before they really identify with themselves, which seems kind of backwards, right? You think you would identify first and then find a peer group, but really they just want to fit in. So they figure out how they are within the peer group, and then they can kind of figure out who they are. So they have a really strong need to be part of a group. If they don't develop this sense of identity, that is when they develop role diffusion, where basically they can't form their own identity. Cognitive development, so Piaget. This is the formal operations, and this is when we get into abstract thinking. All right? This is where they can imagine consequences. So if I talk to a school-age child about college, they couldn't think about, well, if I move away to a different state, then I won't have my parents, support because I'd have to live on campus, or I might have to get a job. But if I live close to home, then my parents are going to be more with me, but I'd have more financial support. An adolescent can start thinking about those things. They can start abstractly thinking. As a school-age child, remember, for them to kind of see the consequences of something, they've kind of had to have lived that experience before, right? Like, I know that this might cause this because I had something similar and I could relate that. Now an adolescent, they can abstract think. They don't, I'm trying to word it right. They don't need that experience to think about what may happen with it, right? Does that make sense? So I've never gone skiing before, but I know that, it's going to be cold and, I'm going to be a little off balance, or I'm going to do that. I don't need to have experienced something to think about how it might affect me, what the consequences might be, what I might need to do. So they really have that abstract thinking, which is awesome. They can think beyond the present. And again, they really care what other people think of them. So, especially their peers. And they can use logic. Although, anyone who's met, a teenager knows that sometimes their logic is flawed. Not always the best. But they technically can use logic. So we don't talk about Kohlberg a lot in the younger age groups, but we do in adolescents, because this is where they really start to change with spiritual moral development. They start questioning their existing moral values and basically the norms of society. So let's say they've gone to church with their parents their whole life, and up until then, remember, it was all about the rituals. Like, I don't really know why I'm doing this, but I feel comfort in the ritual of it. Like, I feel comfortable saying prayers before bed, but I don't know why I say prayers. Now they're questioning it. Well, why am I saying those prayers? Who am I talking to? What does it mean? What do I get out of it? and then they're asking, what are my friends doing? What are they? So they really start to question absolutes and rules, and it's no longer just about the ritual of doing it, but the why behind it, and what am I getting from it? So again, they start questioning the values and beliefs of their family. And because they can understand abstract concepts, they really start to explore. And kids who have really high levels of spirituality or religion tend to do less high-risk behaviors. Even if they don't follow the same religious or spiritual practices as their family, if they grew up with them and it's still embedded in them, they tend to do better in general, even if it's not exactly as their family. Although religion in general tends to decline in adolescents, especially in college-age students, you don't see it being a major aspect for them. Social development, again, they're defined, their identity by their peers and less by their parents. They start confiding less in their parents. You'll laugh at me. And my daughter's going to kill me because I shared this information. But my daughter started her period, and when she told me, I was like, when did you start? And she was like, yesterday. And I was like, we had spent the whole day together. It wasn't yesterday, but when she told me. And we had spent, it happened over a weekend. So we had spent all Saturday together. Once a month, we go and feed the homeless. And so we had gone and fed the homeless for like 4 hours together, and we had done a Girl Scout thing. We'd been together all day, and she freaking said nothing to me all day. And then Sunday morning, she came to me and told me because she needed some product, and she was like, hey, it started, I'm going to need you to tell me what's up. So I was like, oh, I'm so excited. We're going to bake a cake and we're going to whatever. And you're a woman now. And I was like, so it started this morning? And she was like, no, it started yesterday. I was like, it started yesterday? I was like, well, what did you do? We were out all day. And she was like, oh, well, I told Dara, her little friend that was with us. And she's like, I told Dara, and I was like, you told Dara and you didn't tell me. And I started crying because I was like, oh my God, it's happening. She's not going to confide in me. And, I always pride myself on being so open. And then she told her friend before she told me. And I was like, okay, keep it together, woman. It's not about you. This is normal for her. But they really did. She was like, yeah, it was no big deal, Mom. I just told my friends. And she was fine. She was perfectly fine sharing with me, but she wanted to share with her friends first. And that's just very typical. They still love their parents. They still confide in them. And, they still need guidance from their parents. And parents still need to monitor them. But we do have to give them a little bit more freedom and understand that they're going to tend to go to their friends first and not to the parents. They really just want to be accepted by their peers. If I haven't said it enough, the peer group is super important in adolescence. Again, that relationship with the parent change. Our role, they're no longer dependent on us. We don't protect as much, but it's a little bit more mutual affection, equality. And it causes a lot of turmoil, I think, more for us as parents than for the children. Privileges and responsibilities, that's a big time struggle. I'm finding that now with my exchange student. She's 15, and, she got invited to a birthday party a couple weekends ago, and I was like, okay, are the parents going to be home? And she's like, I don't know. I said, well, I need to know. And she was like, well, what? I said, is this a girl party, a girl-boy party? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I need to know. And I was like, so when we got there, I dropped her off. I went to the door and knocked. She was absolutely mortified. She would not talk to me. And I was like, well, if you don't know, I need to know. And I was like, I'm not just dropping you off to some random home. And letting you go. And then, of course, now I'm questioning every parent I know. Like, what would you do? Did you do this? Did you do that? So would you like? Oh, yeah. Okay. So I'm not crazy. But she was like, I just don't understand. Like, and she's like a sweet, amazing, good kid. There's nothing wrong. But as a parent, you're like, okay, I just don't want you to be like killed by a killer, like, some random person. So it's a struggle because all I want to know is that she's safe, but she's, and it's an infringement on her, independence. And so you're constantly fighting this battle with them because you want them to come to you and have good communication, but you still have to kind of monitor them, which is hard. So it's an interesting time frame. Peers assume a more significant role. I think we've already talked about that. Intense influence on their self-esteem. Peers provide that sense of belonging. They give a strength, power, and it's kind of their transition from the family to the world. School is like their social life, okay? So although school is important to learn, for adolescents, it's really all about that social life. It gives them a sense of belonging, and that's why they like to spend a lot of time together. We have to be careful, though. I think we've already kind of talked about social media and the effects of bullying and cyberbullying. It continues. Obviously, it starts, we've kind of talked about it in school age. It starts in school age. It continues even more significantly into adolescence. And it's amazing. I mean, my exchange student, we went to the pumpkin patch this weekend, and we picked out pumpkins, and me and my husband sat on a bench for 30 minutes while my daughter and my exchange student took the same picture, I think 700 times with the pumpkin like I'm like, oh my God, just take the picture. And then we spent 2 hours creating the perfect post to Instagram, where it was like #blessed, harvest, fun, whatever it was. So it's so funny. Their lives are so evolved around. And my daughter doesn't even have a phone yet, so she's just sitting there taking the photo 400 times. So it really is a big part of that social media. And a lot of kids, because they spend all this time trying to get the most perfect picture and the perfect caption and painting this perfect world. It can sometimes create if somebody wants to be another child, another adolescent wants to be part of that peer group and isn't, it makes them feel bad, right? Oh, why didn't I get invited to that party? Look at all those posts from the birthday party and I wasn't part of it, or they seem to be having so much fun with me. So it's not just about direct cyberbullying. It's also a feeling, because remember, adolescents, what do they want to do? Be part of that group. And so when they see their friends being in a group together and they're not part of it, it makes them very upset. So that's another aspect, and they can get depressed from it and feeling rejected and left out. Their sexuality, they are dating like crazy. For sexual orientation, it's just really important to say partner. Don't say, do you have a girlfriend? Do you have a boyfriend? It's not our job to assume. Just say, do you have a partner? A couple nights ago, I was walking my dog. It was 9 o'clock, and with the neighbor boy and his little girlfriend were out in front of the house, I guess, saying goodbye. And they were waiting for me to go away so that they could do their little makeout session. So of course I just stood there with my dog. I was like, hey, what you guys doing? Just to be annoying. But it's really, it's kind of funny. There's actual less sexual activity right now from the 1990s to 2010, which still is about 10 years ago. But there was a decline in sexual activity, if you can believe it. And teenage pregnancies are actually down. So we're doing a good job of saying if you are going to have sex, at least prevent a pregnancy. But there's an increase in sexually transmitted diseases, STDs. So they're protecting against babies, but not against STDs. And that's because babies come from one place and people do sexual activities with other parts of their body. And that's where sexual STDs are increasing. I'm not painting it any more than that. So, and again, reasons for sexual experimentation, they're just curious. Yes, it feels good. But a lot of it is just pressure to conform. So being honest with them, talking about it. We do need to counsel safe sex. A lot of people want to say, well, no, if I tell them how to do sex safely, then that's going to encourage them. No. But if they are going to engage in it, you do want them to be safe. Their self-body, development of their self-body, their self-image. There's lots of confusion in early adolescence. Their hormones, like I said, they're crazy. They are acutely aware of their appearance, and they compare themselves often with others. And blemishes are magnified. I don't know if you remember in high school when you had like the most littlest dot and you're like, oh my God. I mean, my daughter did it. I think I told you all with their school pictures. My daughter was like, oh my God. And it was like this itty bitty dot. You can't even see it. She's like, oh my God, I have the biggest zit and you didn't even get the cover up photo. And she was like, I hate my photo. I hate the way my hair looks. Look at my glasses. They fell down my nose. Like, so hypersensitive where, again, my son was like, yeah, I look good. So they really are everything is out of proportion. It's very magnified. So you have to be kind of careful because they do get depressed, sad. Again, that's why they want to be part of those groups. They want to be accepted. We've already kind of talked about this. They're curious. They want to know if they're normal. They're trying to achieve that perfect body, which is impossible to achieve. Promoting health. This is when they need to start taking responsibility for their own health. We went to the dentist the other day, and the hygienist was like, I'm going to need to talk to you for a minute. And I was like, sure. And she's like, your daughter needs to brush better in the back. I'm like, have you told her? She's 12. I'm not brushing her teeth. So, and it's important for them. They need to take that responsibility, So she was like, oh, I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I'm like, no, it's not hurting her feelings. She just needs to brush a little bit better in the back with her braces. No big deal. But that's her. I'm not going to hold her down and brush her teeth at this point. But if they take medications, allergy medicines, even if it's something silly, just over the counter, at this point in adolescence, they should know, what am I taking? It's ibuprofen. How much do I take? 200 milligrams. Why do I take it when I have a headache? They shouldn't just, Mom, can I have that purple pill? Or, a bag of pills. My mom tells me to take this in the morning. That's not promoting that self-identity and that independence. So they really need to assume that responsibility. They do immunizations. They do a DTaP booster at between 11 and 18 years of age. It's required to get into 7th grade. So once your child, they get all their immunizations at like 4 or 5, and then they don't get anything else until they're going to go into 7th grade. And it is required by Pinellas County that they get the Tdap booster. So it's tetanus, diphtheria, pertussis. Then they can also get meningococcal. They get that again at 11, and they get it again before they go off to college. A lot of college kids get meningitis because they live in dorms, and it's spread very fast and very easily. So we give that meningococcal vaccine. And then the last thing is the HPV, which is relatively newer. But first, it was only advertised in girls. Now, and it was really only pushed and approved by the FDA in girls. Now it's approved for girls and men, women and men, and it's improved until like the age of 45. So they've done a phenomenal job of researching and following up with it. It's a 3-dose series, and they can start it at around that 11-year-old age too. And be honest with them about what they're getting. Again, they're old enough, they should know. We went to her physical, I guess, relatively recently, at beginning of the year, and, they were doing her physical, and they were like, do you want her to get HPV? And I was like, yes. And they're like, does she know? And my daughter goes, that it's a sexually transmitted disease immunization? Yes. And because we've talked about it, I'm not going to do something to her body at 12 that she doesn't know what's going on. When she's younger, they can't comprehend that. But remember, they're adolescents. They can abstract think. They can think that there's a disease that eventually could cause cancer and that this might protect me from it. They can abstract think that. So be honest with them. Tell them what they're getting. Give it to them. Have you seen those? Did we talk about that earlier? Those commercials? Those are like the worst commercials for HPV, where he's like, did you know there was a vaccine? And then it's like a kid and he's getting like older or younger. And he's like, Mom, did you know? Did you know? Mom, did you know? And like the kid dies. And you're like, I know. I'm like, dang. It's like hardcore. I was like, wow, whatever like advertised person is that? Like, I hope you got fired. Because as a parent, it made you feel horrible. Because it's like the adult that they're like sick and dying. And they're like, did you know there was a vaccine when they were younger that could have prevented this? And then it's like the kid as they get younger. And it's like, Mom, did you know? Mom, did you know? Mom, did you know? So, yeah, it's really great. Nutrition. Their nutrition goes to crap when they're adolescents, right? They just like to eat junk. As we're all sitting here eating candy. Thanks, Jasmine. So you just need to make sure that we focus. It's kind of funny. Children are less fit today than we were 20 years ago, but there's more kids playing sports now than ever before. And a lot of that, because you can out-eat any exercise. So it really is about 80% nutrition and only about 20%. I was reading a really cool research article that followed people, and they followed somebody who exercised every day for 30 to 60 minutes, but then was sedentary the rest of the day. And then they followed a group of people that never exercised, but that just got up and walked 10 minutes every 2 hours. And the people that got up and were active, like more consistently through the day, lost more weight and had better outcomes than the person that did their 30 minutes of exercise and then was sedentary. Now, if you exercise and continue to move, you're okay. But a lot of people, what they do is they'll go work out in the morning and then they sit at a desk job all day and then they go home and sit and watch TV all night, and the effects of that are more detrimental. So really keep focusing. They need nutrition to grow. And their nutrition, and they start getting more mobile, right? They start to drive. They're out with their friends. They start getting access to things. Like before, we could control them. We could say, no, we're not getting Chick-fil-A tonight. Now they're going to Chick-fil-A every day after school or stopping at Starbucks every morning. Before, I don't know how these kids afford this. I can't afford it. So I want to be in their family. But so we still have to kind of educate them and increase those healthy lifestyle habits. Sleep and rest. They get about 9 hours of sleep a night, although they probably need a lot more. It's funny. It's because of the buses and because of school sports. But really, adolescents love to sleep in, right? My daughter can sleep until like 11, 12 o'clock without even blinking an eye. But they have the earliest school times. And a lot of that, again, they have to stagger the buses in every county. And they also like the high school kids to go earlier because the high school kids are more likely to play sports. So they don't want them playing at like 10 o'clock at night. So sometimes there's a lot of sleep deprivation happening because of their schedules with homework. And I'm talking to all of you, like you don't have any sleep deprivation at all. But between their schedules and sports and homework, and when they do have that sleep deprivation, they can't concentrate. They're more likely to be depressed, obese. So sleep is super important. Again, we talked about exercise and activity, dental health, personal care. Sometimes adolescents can be nasty. Like it's like they stop. Parents become less involved, right? Because they're 12, 13. Like, I'm not going in there brushing my daughter's teeth, but like their like personal hygiene sometimes goes to crap. And like maybe they didn't wear deodorant before, and you know, sometimes, I don't know, I smell bad when I work out, but that's TMI. But you know, sometimes you just don't smell yourself or whatever. Kids are like, I don't smell. And you're like, here is deodorant. Like, here, do this. Because with all their like hormone changes and body changes, they do sometimes get a little funky. And you have to kind of educate them, teach them, encourage them. Like, you'll be like, when was the last time you showered? I don't know, 3 days ago. Like, have you washed? Like, they like to wear the same sweaters all the time or the same leggings. And you're like, I know that sweater hasn't touched the washing machine in 3 weeks. Like, could you please, it's smelling so bad. Or their rooms become disasters. So sometimes personal hygiene gets a little bit wacky. So really encouraging them with that personal care. Vision and hearing, they get screened at school. Scoliosis, they get screened at school. That Adams test that we talked about when they bend over and touch their toes. We are seeing lots of kids that are getting body art. Parents are approving it. I believe for tattoos, you have to be, another teacher. You have to be 18 or older. If you want it below 18, you have to have your parent approval. Piercings, I think it's 16 depending on where it is. But you're seeing a lot of kids with more body art nowadays. Just fine. It's just really good care of it. Because I have seen some nasty infections. I've seen piercings get embedded into the skin. Like you don't see belly buttons pierced as much anymore. But I used to see a lot of belly buttons that would just get like embedded into the skin. What's so funny? Huh? I have seen a pretty much I have seen labial piercings, nipple piercings, back piercings. I've seen more than I've wanted. Teenagers, older teenagers, yeah, that come into the ER for various reasons. So they have it, but just taking care of it, you know, there's increased risk for, and making sure that if they are getting body art, they're getting it at a reputable place, that it's not just somebody like out of the back of their car, so that they don't get like hepatitis or something. You know, they love to go sunbathe, you know, sit out at the beach all day. You know, that's the life, right? So just teaching them about, you know, it's hard because, again, adolescents, they can abstract think, right? But of course, their logic is always, it's not going to happen to me. So even though they can abstract think, and even though they can think about those things, sometimes they don't think those things are going to happen to them. So, but we still need to teach them stress reduction, sexuality, education. Just we talk to them, make sure that we encourage them to share their feelings, their experiences. And again, if you don't talk to them about it, great, because they're going to talk to somebody else about it. So don't think that if you don't talk to them, then it's going to be some big secret. They're still going to find out. They're going to hear it from TV, from social media, from friends. And that's who they're going to model, is their peer group. So you want to make sure that their peer group is educated correctly. Injury prevention. Again, I said that, you know, they do have logic, but they don't always use it great in adolescence. The number one reason for fatality is motor vehicle crashes, whether they are the driver, the passenger, or a pedestrian that gets hit by a motor vehicle. And obviously cell phones are making this way worse with texting. Firearms, you see that sometimes, just accidental sports injuries are on the rise, especially we see a lot of concussions with football. Water safety. They have a lot of energy, teenagers, especially teenage boys. And they have all this energy and they need to get it out. And sometimes they're just not logically thinking when they're trying to expend this energy. So they do stupid stuff, like they are crazy jumps into a pool, or, they just don't make always the best choices. So it's still important for us to educate them. They do, obviously alcohol and tobacco. Vaping is really big right now. They just pulled Juul. I don't know if you guys saw. They just lost, or, they got sued by families because they were saying that Juul was targeting children with their flavored pods. So yeah, a few died. Yeah. So, because kids were just going crazy with the pods because it tasted like candy. So, I think they just lost a huge lawsuit. So, Juul had to pull all of their flavored pods off market because they felt they were being targeted.
Their website, like during our tobacco association day, we looked at their website and like they showed like people who looked like they were like adolescents, like like sitting with their Juul pods and stuff. Yeah, the advertisement, like they were like in like these like cute little like clothes that like I guess like kids wear, like colorful and all this stuff, right? And
it was like a Visco girl.
And stuff.
You guys know what that is? I learned that.
Oh yeah,
a Visco girl. Have you?
Yeah, with the scrunchies.
With the scrunchies, and they want to save turtles. Oh yeah, just wait. I'm learning all sorts of things from my little exchange student, and most of it is not German. Yeah, and they do. They advertise. Tobacco companies advertise, right? Because if they can get someone hooked younger, they have a person for longer, right? And again, a lot of times they just want to challenge authority by drinking or smoking. They want to fit into a peer group. They think it's going to relieve stress. So there's lots of reasons why they experiment with drugs and alcohol and tobacco. But again, educating them, going over why it's important to avoid it, or at least use it. Don't encourage them to use it. Anticipatory guidance for families. All right, so all this time we've talked about kids and the support that they're going to need. Now we really are providing anticipatory guidance for the parents. The parents need help. Their teenage kids are crazy, their hormones, like they're nervous all the time that their child is going to get pregnant or do drugs or alcohol. So the kids are like, woohoo, I've got independence, I've got my friends, I'm living my life. And parents are like, what the freak is happening to my sweet little kid that I used to have? So really there's a lot of support needed for the parents during this age. Help them with the information regarding their developmental changes and that things are normal, that mood swings are normal, that it's okay to start letting go, still providing guidance and structure and that but allowing some of that to go, giving them more independence. And that's pretty much it.